Hello. Yesterday I was on Threads going to dump my stream of consciousness as I do, and I get into this development of how addiction is actually manufactured and profitable in our current societal structure. And I had so much to say, it didn't fit in a thread. So we are here now to talk about it. And I'm also gonna put some makeup on because I always love watching those lives or reels where it's like a get ready with me and like chit chat about something or other. But usually when I'm doing my makeup, I'm like really, it's me time focused in. So let me get adjusted to this multitasking. Okay, so let's start at the ripe age of you're a fetus in your mom's womb, right? And this is where in a industrialized medical sick care environment, the chemical cascade of the birthing industry is quite literally the first touch point of manufacturing your addiction before you even pop out of the womb. So, you know, we're not even getting into the conversation of if your mom was working in a like 9-to-5 workplace environment, or even if she's her own business owner and she's operating under a lot of stress, then your nervous system is developing in that environment and you get addicted to the chemicals of stress in the womb. And then when it's time to be born, the chemical cascade of birth is, you know, inducting with Pitocin, and then the good old epidural to numb the pain. Like, why are you in so much pain? Yeah, birth is painful, but like, can we not create an imprint that will continue that pain throughout the lifespan? And I'm not shaming moms for choosing the epidural, right? Like, I always go back and forth with this because we can't control birth, but they're gonna try to. This is really the whole premise of addiction, is like seeking for control, seeking for safety, seeking for sensation from external sources. So if you came into the world anything like me, then you were immediately injected with drugs. That was your introduction into this social structure in the medical birthing industrial complex. Welcome. Right? And then these medical providers and institutes are profiting from the drugs that they are administering to you as a newborn baby. The more the merrier. You even heard a story where like a woman was refusing Tylenol or like Advil or whatever, like, you know, minor painkillers given to you after birth, and she got in this like heated argument with a nurse because she's like, no, I'm good, like I don't need it. And the nurse is like, you don't get any bonus points for not taking Tylenol. And she's like, okay, I know, but this is uncomfortable. It's not painful, so like, I'm good, right? It's a lot of coercion. And that woman in particular, she's like a YouTuber that I used to follow, and her birth plan was to not have an epidural, and then like in the heat of the moment they're like, do you want the epidural? And she's at like the peak of her pain, and like, of course, if you're offering a woman a relief of pain when she's literally in a psychedelic trance state, accessing different dimensions, and bringing life into this world, it's like, especially if that woman has like people-pleasing tendencies, she's gonna be like, yeah, whatever, like, give me that. This is intolerable. And I'm confused if there's people here or not. If you're here, if you're joining, say hi in the chat. So yeah, adducts are manufactured from in utero, and then, okay, let's say now you're a baby and your parents have jobs, or they're building a business, or whatever it is. A lot of times you will, again, be in that environment of like high stress, and a lot of times sat in front of a screen, especially as like toddlers, to high stimulation. And so it's like programming the nervous system to orient towards intensity for soothing itself, and shifting the original like wiring of connection to numb out the sensitivity that creates emotional attunement, like literally as a toddler. Okay. Then, again, the food and water system are pumped with drugs. And by that, I mean like fluoride and pesticides and sugar. Can we talk about sugar addiction for a second? Right, and these are like all things that I have these are all things I have experienced and have either overcome or are actively overcoming, right? Like, I go in and out with sugar still. I don't really love this format of doing my makeup and talking. I feel like I'm not very present, but you know, we try things. Sometimes they're for us, sometimes they're not. I feel like I've said nowhere near what I wanted to say. Okay, what else? Okay, then let's get into the education system. Kids are sat in rooms and discouraged from moving around, discouraged from connecting again. and sat in there for like 8 hours a day with their attention directed to something outside of themselves and no attention or value placed on, again, emotional attunement, body connection, how to like take care of yourself, how to be healthy. Is there a filter on my face? I think there is. I don't want a filter on my face. How do I take that off? Weird. I feel like I'm gonna end up redoing this live. This format does not work for me. Okay, what am I talking about? Then when kids grow old enough in that system, on the weekends, they're like, hey, let's drink and party and smoke to have a sense of freedom and to like form social bonds, right? And I feel like I gotta sneeze. Okay. Then comes university, college, if you're following the like social structure format that our parents were convinced was like the road to success. The like drinking and addiction and like drug use culture in universities is actually absurd. And I don't know if like you know anybody who had a university experience sober, but I personally don't. And it was such a part of the culture that I didn't actually even realize I had a problem until I stopped. Because the people around me were either like at the same level of consumption or more. And to put this into context, I was like drinking 3 or 4 times nudity and body exposure. Were you naked in the back of my video? Were you naked in the back of my video?
No.
My live just got restricted.
Everything was naked.
That's so weird.
Naked without issue.
Yeah, I just got a restriction on my account. That's great. Yeah, so I was like going out and drinking and like mind you, to the point of like blacking out 3 or 4 times a week in university, and like so were all my friends. And just doing lots of substances, like smoking and amphetamines and just like sometimes anything I could get my hands on, really. And oftentimes it was just like given to me. So at this pivotal like rite of passage in our development from teenage to adulthood, and same as like from childhood to teenagehood, is when substances are just so prevalent in the social structure of like how the environments that people connect in, and also the context and framing of like what it means to relax. So then, like, let's continue along the lifespan, and you get into the workforce, either, you know, as a 9 to 5 in an office, even if you're doing like contract work. Then I'm from Canada. Seeing some comments. Thanks for commenting. If you're here, comment. If you have a similar story, like, share your take on this, like how society manufactures and profits from addiction. In these jobs, we're just like so externally focused, so, hello from Colombia, so put on like these pressures and these timetables and these obligations of showing up to a specific space to do a specific task in a specific time frame, and it's just, there's just like very little freedom. And if you are someone that works in a field that there is a bit more perception of freedom, like maybe you're a contractor, maybe you have like flexible working hours, maybe it's just like, you know, you have a set of deliverables and it doesn't really matter like how you do it or when you do it, where you do it, but as long as you get it done. Because that's like creates this like psychological difference from the mainstream perception of like what it means to be employed in a restrictive sense, then that gets pedestaled as like, oh, like look at all these great benefits that I get, but then you're still operating within a context of like outsourcing your attention and how your basic needs get covered, you know, financially in our system, to another person, another like governing entity. We could get into a whole conversation about the government and taxes and, you know, how like the political structures create this whole illusion of having a voice in a system when even the political figures don't really, or they're not speaking from their own voice, it's just somebody else's agenda, right? And so then let's talk about, like, I mean, we've gone through kind of the life cycle, right? And in those jobs, a lot of people, again, are like meeting at happy hour for meetings, meeting at bars on weekends, meeting at restaurants and having drinks and, you know, taking breaks and smoking. Like, especially if you work in the restaurant industry, you basically get more freedom by having an addiction to smoking cigarettes than you would if you did not. So the like powers that be want you addicted, they want you numbed out, they want to profit from this in terms of direct revenue from, you know, drug and alcohol, and also like indirect let's frame it like this, let's frame it as like the return on investment from creating this like fear-based control systems and propaganda that creates codependency and addiction cycles in its citizens. You are going to be much easier to influence, to control, to stay in these consumption cycles, whether it be sugar, whether it be alcohol, whether it be, you know, content addiction. Like, that's another one I'm still like navigating, and I'll like use to numb out if I'm in bed at night and my partner's not present and I'm like wanting that connection before bed, then I'm gonna go to social media for it. And you know, this is, again, it's manufactured, and who's profiting from that, right? The people that are marketing on platforms, and the platform itself gains from you being there. This is actually a really sad life. I feel like sad, but we're gonna get around to like, okay, well, what can we do about this? How can we regain our sovereignty and agency inside of a system that is manufacturing and profiting from our addiction? I just want to go in a little bit more on like family dynamics and how even if there isn't like a substance abuse issue, then oftentimes there'll be like a workaholism addiction or like whatever it is that draws attention away from emotional attunement and connection. I'd say like that is like the antithesis to addiction, really. It's like presence, emotional attunement, and connection. There is no need to be outsourcing or numbing when those are present, right? So that's where we can create our social bonds and the ways that we connect within our families and within our communities based in what is trying to be redirected by these external drivers, right? The revolution and the rebellion is always going to be within how we choose to orient ourselves within these systems. So even if you were pumped full of drugs in utero or immediately in the world, even if you were raised in a family where you were sat in front of a TV with sugar snacks every day, even if you were raised in a family dynamic that didn't center connection and presence and emotional attunement, even if you developed a so distracting having you here, and substance abuse and alcoholism and dependency in your teenage and early adulthood years through the social connections and networks that you're a part of. And even if you became disconnected from your vitality and your aliveness and your life force and your purpose and your internal world through the education and workforce systems, the human spirit is literally so resilient, and there is so much support, seen and unseen, to shift out of these cycles, that once you actually commit, and it has to be a choice that's internally motivated, then you can undo all of those patterns. You can choose to remove yourself from social situations that operate in the context of drinking and smoking and drug use, right? And I remember when I first did this in 2020, and I stopped going out. I stopped being friends with pretty much everyone in my network at the time, because I could see that there was this like divergence happening with the people around me, like going deeper and deeper into these systems and cycles, and like really rooting into like being a teacher and a lawyer, or a business consultant for a traditional firm, or like and the police force and the military, where it's just, or even like my restaurant and like flight attendant friends, like it is these contexts that profit from you staying disconnected and numb and poisoning yourself inside of that environment, and just being filled with more and more and more poison. And the more you do that, the more the system profits, the deeper you get into it, right? So this really like wreaks havoc on friendships, on your relationship with yourself, your mental health, your holistic health, and like family dynamics. Like think of how many families are torn apart by addiction, rather that be to like work, alcohol, cigarettes, weed, harder drugs, like social media, porn. Even I've had like at times like a workout and a food addiction create a lot of disconnection in some of my friendships, because I was so like ingrained in the cycles of seeking that high intensity and being in a space of grasping for control, that was externalized, right? Like when we feel out of control internally over our feelings, our thoughts, our actions, then we'll redirect our attention, hone in on something specific externally, like our food, like our exercise, to try to regain a sense of agency, right? Rather than actually doing the deeper work to look at like, okay, why do I have such a grip? Why does this pattern have such a grip on me? And the thing is, like, a lot of that comes from a non-verbal place, and it's rooted in these unconscious recesses of our psyche that exist in the realm of our soma, in our fascia, in our tissues. And so if you, again, go to like talk therapy or a coaching space that is operating on the level of conscious awareness, isn't going into the body, into deeper space holding for those charges, those repressed emotions, where a bid for connection or a impulse for expression was met with suppression or nothing, right? Like straight up, like a lot of times in family dynamics, like a bid for connection will just be met with nothing. And to reprocess that and learn to actually root into our self-connection so that we're attracting relationships that are also going to operate in a different context of prioritizing genuine connection. The space holding's an art, right? And the person who is there needs to be able to see beyond what is being said. Like, I was on a call yesterday and I noticed that the woman leading the call was really out of breath, and she had like a red rashiness on her chest. And so immediately, like, I picked up on that. I was like, okay, what's going on beneath the surface of what she's saying? And I'm actually gonna reach out to her. I meant to yesterday, but I got pulled into something else. But like, that's information, that's energy trying to move, trying to reprocess. But if we're constantly looping in these cycles of like addiction to external validation, to producing a certain result, right? Because for a lot of people, like, these cycles of addiction are sneaky. Like, it's interesting how it works. Of like, you maybe at one point were more in an obvious way entrenched into, you know, the high fructose, like corn syrup, glucose dominant diet, or actual like substances, weed, alcohol, other things, amphetamines. But then you shift that, and usually addiction will find like a new way to manifest itself. That being like, a lot of entrepreneurs who are really successful do have a past with addiction, because that sensory seeking, that attunement of your nervous system to intensity gets to be funneled into workaholism and like productivity addiction. Like, think about what it feels like to receive a large amount of money, or to receive an award, or to receive recognition. The dopamine and adrenaline and serotonin and like boost in confidence, I'm sure there's studies on this, but it's very similar to the chemical cascade that takes place in our like neurochemical, biological pathways that would happen if we're consuming substances, right? The difference is that one is socially encouraged and the other is not. And also, I don't want to demonize like high achievers, right? That's not the point. I'm not here to say like your ambition is a problem, your productivity is a problem. And my language, I don't like to frame things as problems at all. It's about this gap in perceived reality and shared reality. And the intention, the driver, is what's going to create a different architecture. In your business, in your success, is the driver explicit, coming from hitting money milestones, from receiving that validation, from being perceived in a certain way? Or is it coming from this deeper place of, I'm doing what I came here to do? I'm expanding into more of my soul gifts and expression through this work. I'm creating genuine connections with people that are not just putting me on a pedestal and allowing me to leverage like social status and credentials and charisma to climb some ladder, right? And so the way that we become revolutionaries in a system that manufactures and profits from our addiction is through genuine connection, is through choosing to shift the architecture of our social bonds in relationships, right? The number one predictor of addiction is childhood trauma. And, to varying degrees, we all have our experience of that. And really what trauma is when there's an input to the system that is overwhelming due to the support network, the resources not matching the environment, where individual collapses in on themselves and makes the environment, the circumstances, mean something about their worth, about their identity, about the safety to express themselves and to have their needs met and to move towards their desires. When we're prioritizing connection with ourselves, that's the flip, right? We're prioritizing our needs, we're prioritizing moving towards our desires, we're prioritizing resourcing ourselves with networks of connection that are sharing responsibility and collaborating on creating richer networks of like midwifing this new way of being into reality, right? It's great to have vision. It's great to be able to speak your story. But what momentum is being built from that? And that can't be created in isolation. And what happens in addiction is like there's layers of shame that shame likes to hide, right? That are placed in like our somatic experience. And so the impulse is to isolate and to create in a hyper individualistic way to prove the worth, but our worth is inherent because we are here and present and alive. And the more we can feel that reality, the presence, the aliveness in our bodies by feeling what has been placed on top of that, then there's this alchemical process that takes place that's actually shifting the context for ourselves, how we're relating to the different parts of ourselves and to our story, our past experiences, what meaning we make of that, and for the people that are in our sphere, and that ripples out into the larger collective culture. And as much as this is relevant for our family relationships, our partnerships, our love relationships, our friendships, it's just as relevant for our business relationships. And I think that a lot of people will create compartmentalization there, where business is non-emotional and strictly professional and strictly like, we're hitting these milestones, we're hitting these deliverables, it's results oriented. And that robs us of the power to be emotionally in tuned, genuinely connected, and moving towards building in a way that is dismantling the pressure on the individual to perform and to remain in these cycles of high intensity sensation seeking, whether that be from work, from drugs, from alcohol, from relationship dynamics. And like, it's a process, right? There's trillions of dollars, and this has been happening. Like, I don't know about the history of addiction, but I would be like pretty fair to say that before like the 1800s, like there probably weren't that many addicts around. I think addiction is like a symptom of our current cultural context. When we were relating in like a village and tribal way and interdependent for meeting our basic needs and child rearing and growing food and building shelter and these things, like it just there isn't the infrastructure to support that, right? Like, where are you going to get alcohol? Where are you going to go? Where like you can't survive in that context in that way, right? It's just not set up for it. It's set up for connection and for co-creation and for co-creating, where the interdependence makes it so that when one person is struggling with something, then the collective comes in to be like, hey, what's going on? Like, how can we work together to evolve from this dynamic? And we're robbed of that when we're operating in isolation. So I feel like I'm kind of looping at this point. And I think I want to redo this one because I haven't eaten yet. And I feel like my thoughts are all kind of over here rather than like, which is okay. Not every transmission is going to be in the perfect frequency of expression that we want, right? That's at the end of the day, like, we are human, even though our consciousness exists in multiple realities and dimensions simultaneously. The way that our biology functions is cyclical, rhythmic, nonlinear, and the more we can accept that and not force consistency of how we're showing up, of our identity, of our expression, and we allow these like seasons and cycles and ebbs and flows and allow others to see us in that, the more we can deconstruct the pedestaling that is leveraging, again, this like, I'm not enough as I am today frame that has us either sensory seeking or numbing out. What are your thoughts? What do you think is the way to curb the manufacturing and profit of addiction in our social context? For me, as a recap, I didn't get into this one too much, but like nature connection, like the more we're connected to the nature, the more we're connected to ourselves. And then the more we're connected to other people, the more we're connected to ourselves, because we are a part of nature that is inseparable. And anything that we're experiencing, when we can actually zoom out and look at it from a systemic perspective and not collapse into shame spirals of individual responsibility, then we can actually root into a radical responsibility to collaborate on shifting the way we're relating. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope that this has created a clarity in how you're choosing to operate in your relationships and in the world. Bye-bye for now.